The Draconari were creatures of the sky, and everyone in the galaxy knew this simple truth. Their cities floated among clouds, their poems sang of wind beneath wings, and their very souls seemed tied to the freedom of flight. To be Draconari was to soar, and to lose that ability was considered worse than death itself. Korthax Velshan had once been the pride of her species, a diplomat whose silver scales caught light like scattered stars, and whose wings could carry her through storms without rest. She had negotiated treaties that ended wars and spoken words that brought peace to hostile worlds. Now she lay in a medical chamber within the Galactic Embassy complex on Earth, unable to move anything below her neck. Her once brilliant scales growing dull with each passing day. Months had passed since the assassination attempt that shattered her spine. 3 months of staring at ceilings and refusing visitors. 3 months of watching her own reflection grow more like a ghost than a living being. Daniel Cooper walked his security rounds through the medical wing that evening, his prosthetic leg making a soft click against the polished floor with each step. At 52 years old, the retired Marine had seen enough of life to recognize when something was wrong. And tonight his instincts screamed at him. The medical staff stood outside Korthax's chamber, their faces tight with worry. "She locked us out again," one of the nurses explained when Daniel approached. "Override codes are not working," and she disabled the emergency protocols from inside. Daniel looked through the observation window and felt his stomach drop. The Draconari diplomat was using her teeth to drag herself across the bed, inch by painful inch, toward a ceremonial blade that rested on a nearby table. He recognized the weapon from his cultural briefings. It was used for what the Draconari called honorable ending, the ritual death that paralyzed members of their species traditionally chose. He did not hesitate. He pulled his security override chip from his pocket and slammed it against the door panel. The lock disengaged with a hiss, and he pushed inside before anyone could stop him. Korthax froze when she saw him. Her golden eyes, once fierce and proud, now held nothing but shame and exhaustion. "Get out," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have no right to be here, human." Daniel closed the door behind him and walked slowly toward her. He did not reach for the blade, did not try to move it away. Instead, he pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. "You are correct," he said calmly. "I have no right to be here. But I am here anyway, and I am not leaving. Do you know what that blade represents?" Korthax demanded, her neck straining as she tried to look at him with dignity despite her position. "It is my choice. My people have honored this tradition for 10,000 years. A Draconari who cannot fly is not truly alive." "That sounds like something someone else decided for you," Daniel replied. "Not something you actually believe." Korthax let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "What would you know about it, human? Your kind crawls along the ground like insects. You have never known what it means to touch the sky and then have it taken from you." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he reached down and rolled up his left pant leg, revealing the sleek prosthetic limb that replaced his leg below the knee. "Maybe not the sky," he said. "But I knew what it meant to run, to fight, to stand on my own 2 feet. One was a Marine for 23 years. My legs carried me across battlefields on 6 different worlds. Then one day, an explosion took one of them away. And suddenly, everything I thought I was seemed like a lie." Korthax stared at his prosthetic, her expression unreadable. "I spent 8 months wanting to die," Daniel continued, his voice steady but soft. "I pushed away everyone who tried to help. I convinced myself that a broken soldier was worthless, that I would never be whole again. I came very close to making a permanent decision based on temporary pain." "What stopped you?" Korthax asked, and there was something in her voice that had not been there before. "Curiosity, a friend who refused to leave me alone," Daniel answered. "Someone who sat with me even when I screamed at them to go away." Someone who kept showing up until I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was more than the sum of my working parts. He leaned forward slightly, meeting her golden eyes with his steady brown ones. I am not going to tell you that everything will be fine, he said. I am not going to promise that you will fly again, because I do not know if that is true. But I can tell you this. The person who tried to kill you wanted you to end up exactly where you are right now. Broken and ready to finish their work for them, Corthax's eyes widened slightly at his words. Whoever did this to you, Daniel continued, they are counting on your traditions to do what their assassins failed to accomplish. They want you to pick up that blade. The question is, do you want to give them that victory? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The blade gleamed on the table, within reach if Corthax truly wanted it then. Slowly, she turned her head away from the weapon. I do not know what I want, she admitted, her voice cracking. I do not know how to exist like this. My people will never accept me. I am an embarrassment to everything we stand for. Then maybe it is time to stand for something new, Daniel said. Or sit for it, in your case. Either way, you do not have to figure it out tonight. He stood and moved the blade to a shelf on the far side of the room, then returned to his chair. I have another hour before my shift ends, he said. Mind if I sit here for a while? Corthax studied him with those ancient golden eyes, searching for pity or disgust and finding neither. Why do you care? She finally asked. I am nothing to you, Daniel shrugged. Maybe I just know what it feels like to be nothing. And maybe I know that nobody has to stay that way. He settled back in his chair and pulled out a small tablet. Beginning to read, as if he had all the time in the world, Corthax watched him for a long time. This strange human who had walked into her darkness without asking permission. She did not understand him, not yet, but for the first time in 3 months. She felt something other than despair. She felt curious, and curiosity, she realized, was a reason to see tomorrow. Daniel came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He never announced himself or asked permission. He simply appeared during his breaks, sat in the same chair, and sometimes talked while other times he just read in comfortable silence. At first Corthax pretended to ignore him. She would turn her head toward the window and stare at the sky she could no longer reach, hoping he would take the hint and leave. But Daniel Cooper was not the kind of man who took hints, and eventually she grew tired of pretending. Tell me about the sky, he said one afternoon, setting down his tablet. What does it feel like to fly? Corthax was surprised by the question. Most species asked about Draconari politics or their advanced technology. No one ever asked about something so personal. It is freedom, she said slowly, searching for words that could capture something so essential. When you leave the ground, all the weight of the world falls away. The wind speaks to you, guides you, challenges you. Every flight is a conversation between your body and the air itself. She paused, her throat tightening, and now that conversation is over forever. She continued. I am trapped in silence. My wings are still attached to my body, but they might as well be made of stone. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. After I lost my leg, I used to dream about running. Every night for almost a year, I would run through fields and forests, and it felt so real. Then I would wake up and remember that I could not do it anymore. Does it ever stop? Corthax asked. The dreaming? No, Daniel admitted. But it changes. Now, when I dream about running, I wake up and I am grateful for the memory instead of angry about the loss. It took a long time to get there, though. Over the following weeks, their conversations grew deeper. Corthax learned about Daniel's military service, about the ambush that cost him his leg while saving 3 members of his squad. She learned about the dark months of recovery when he pushed away his family and friends, convinced that he was broken beyond repairing return. She told him about her rise through Draconari politics, about the enemies she made while fighting corruption. She spoke of the night when attackers ambushed her shuttle and severed her spine with a precision strike designed to leave her alive but destroyed. They wanted me to suffer, she said. Death would have been mercy. Paralysis was punishment. Any idea who ordered it? Daniel asked. I have suspicions, Korthax replied. I was investigating illegal weapons trading between the Valerie and certain Draconari officials. Someone powerful wanted me silenced, and they knew exactly how to hurt me most. Daniel filed that information away. The security training made it impossible to hear about a conspiracy without wanting to investigate. One morning, he arrived with a young woman in a white medical coat. Her name was Lisa Monroe, and she introduced herself as a physical therapist who specialized in xenobiology. I have studied your species' anatomy, Lisa explained to Korthax, her voice nervous but determined. Draconari medicine gave up on you because they focus on restoring flight capability. If that is impossible, they consider the patient beyond help. And you believe differently? Korthax asked, her tone skeptical. Human medicine developed for a species that cannot fly, Lisa said. We learned to help people who lost the ability to walk, to move their arms, to control their own bodies. We have centuries of experience helping broken people find new ways to function. Maybe some of that knowledge can help you too. Korthax looked at Daniel, who simply shrugged. What do you have to lose? He asked. The first therapy sessions were painful and humiliating. Lisa worked on stimulating nerve pathways that Draconari doctors had ignored, focusing on Korthax's front limbs rather than her useless wings. Progress was measured in millimeters, in the faint twitch of a finger or the slight curl of a claw, but progress existed. And that alone was revolutionary during this time. A shuttle arrived from the Draconari homeworld carrying High Counselor Zethrak, one of the most powerful officials in their government. He requested a private audience with Korthax, and the medical staff had no choice but to allow it. Daniel watched from outside the room, unable to hear the conversation, but reading the body language clearly. Zethrak stood tall and rigid, his posture radiating disappointment and barely concealed disgust. Korthax seemed to shrink under his gaze, her brief spark of hope flickering when Zethrak emerged. He paused beside Daniel. You are the human who interfered with her honorable ending, the counselor said. It was not a question. I am the human who stopped someone from making a permanent mistake, Daniel replied. Evan Lysathrak studied him with cold eyes. You do not understand our ways. A Draconari who cannot fly brings shame to their family, their clan, their entire species. By keeping her alive, you condemn her to an existence of suffering and humiliation. With respect. Counselor, that sounds like a problem with your traditions. Not with her existence. The Draconari scales rippled with anger. Her family will pay the social cost of her stubbornness. Her parents will be shunned. Her siblings will lose their positions. Is your human compassion worth destroying everyone she loves? He walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving Daniel standing in the corridor with a weight in his chest inside the room. Korthax lay motionless, tears streaming down her silver scales. When Daniel entered, she could not even look at him. He says I must choose honorable retirement or my family will suffer, she whispered. They will lose everything because of me. How can I be so selfish? Daniel sat down in his usual chair. Is that really your choice to make? Or is it their choice how they respond to an unjust system? You do not understand, Korthax said. Our culture has worked this way for thousands of years. Who am I to challenge that? You are someone who was almost murdered for fighting corruption, Daniel replied. You are someone who survived when they wanted you dead. Maybe you are exactly the right person to challenge traditions that cause more harm than good. He leaned forward. Lisa told me you moved your front fingers today. First time in 3 months that any part of your body responded to therapy. That is not nothing, Korthax. That is proof that things can change, Korthax closed her eyes. "I am so tired of fighting." "I know," Daniel said softly. "But you do not have to fight alone." Not anymore. When he left that night, Korthax lay awake for hours, thinking about wings and chains and the strange human who refused to let her give up. Somewhere in the darkness, a small flame of defiance began to burn. 4 months passed, and Korthax Velsham learned to measure victory in small movements rather than great flights. A finger that could curl around a stylus. A wrist that could rotate enough to tap a keyboard. A shoulder that could lift just high enough to reach her own face. Lisa Monroe worked with her every day, developing new techniques that combined human rehabilitation science with Draconari physiology. The progress was slow but undeniable, and each small gain chipped away at the despair that nearly consumed her. Daniel spent his personal savings on a custom mobility chair, calling in favors from military engineers he had served with to create something that could support Korthax's unique body structure. It was not elegant like Draconari technology, but it was functional, built with the practical human philosophy that something did not need to be beautiful if it worked. The first time Korthax moved independently in 4 months, propelling herself across the room with her partially recovered front limbs. She wept. "It is not flying," she said through her tears. "No," Daniel agreed, standing beside her. "It is crawling. And sometimes crawling is braver than flying, because it means you refuse to stay down." As Korthax's body slowly healed, Daniel quietly investigated the assassination attempt. His security clearance gave him access to records that others overlooked, and his military background taught him how to ask the right questions without drawing attention. He discovered that the weapon used against Korthax was a Valori neural disruptor, technology that was supposedly restricted to their military forces. For such a weapon to reach an assassin meant high-level involvement, either corruption or conspiracy at the governmental level. Commander Nathan Price, Daniel's former commanding officer who now served as military liaison to the Galactic Council, provided additional intelligence. The Valori had been pushing for expanded trade agreements that the Draconari consistently blocked. Removing a key Draconari diplomat could shift the balance of power, but something did not add up. The assassins had the opportunity to kill Korthax outright, yet they chose to paralyze her instead. That suggested they wanted her to suffer, which pointed to someone who hated her personally rather than just politically. Daniel began investigating the Draconari officials Korthax had mentioned, the ones she suspected of illegal weapons trading. If those officials wanted her silenced, they might have arranged the attack themselves while making it look like Valori aggression. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous the picture became. Meanwhile, Korthax started attending diplomatic functions again. Her mobility chair drew stares and whispers from delegates across the galaxy. Some species looked at her with pity, others with curiosity, and some Draconari refused to acknowledge her presence at all. But the humans were different. They greeted her the same way they always had, with respect and professional courtesy. Her disability seemed invisible to them, or perhaps simply irrelevant. "Why do your people not care that I am broken?" Korthax asked Daniel one evening as they sat in the embassy garden. The stars were emerging overhead, and she tried not to think about how she once danced among them. "Humans have a complicated history with disability," Daniel explained. "For a long time, we treated our wounded and sick the same way the Draconari do, as burdens to be hidden or eliminated. But over centuries, we learned better." He pointed toward the sky. "Some of our greatest scientists could not walk. Some of our finest musicians could not hear. Leaders who changed history did so from wheelchairs and sickbeds. We learned that the body is just a container, and what matters is what you do with the mind and heart inside it. Your species never stops surprising me," Korthax admitted. "We are stubborn like that," Daniel smiled. "We refuse to accept limits, even the ones our own bodies try to impose." A few days later, Commander Price contacted Daniel with troubling news. Someone had filed paperwork requesting his transfer to a remote outpost on the Outer Rim, effectively removing him from the embassy complex permanently. The request came through official channels, but bore no clear signature. "Someone wants you away from the Draconari Diplomat," Price said. "You must have rattled the wrong cage." Daniel was not surprised, but he was worried. If powerful people were trying to separate him from Korthax, it meant they saw their growing partnership as a threat. He told Korthax about the transfer request, expecting her to tell him to go, to protect himself from political retaliation instead. She contacted the Draconari embassy and made a formal request that Daniel Cooper be assigned as her personal security consultant. The paperwork was filed within hours, protected by diplomatic protocols that overrode the transfer order. "You did not have to do that," Daniel said when he learned what she had done. "You saved my life," Korthax replied. "Not once, but many times, simply by refusing to let me destroy myself. This is the least I can do in return. It will make enemies for you." "I already have enemies," she said. "At least now I also have friends." As winter settled over New Geneva, Korthax continued her recovery while quietly gathering evidence through diplomatic channels. She used her position to request communications records and transaction logs. Building on the foundation Daniel had established, the picture that emerged was damning. Ambassador Trellis of the Valori had coordinated with a faction of corrupt Draconari officials to orchestrate the assassination. The Draconari wanted her silenced because she was too close to exposing their crimes. The Valori wanted the trade agreements pushed through. Both sides benefited from her death or permanent incapacitation. The choice to paralyze rather than kill her was deliberate. The corrupt Draconari knew their own culture would finish the job. They expected Korthax to choose honorable ending rather than live as a burden, eliminating herself without their hands appearing dirty. "They used our own traditions as a weapon against me," Korthax said, her voice cold with fury. "They knew exactly how to hurt me, and they counted on my culture to complete their murder. Are you ready to expose them?" Daniel Asked Korthax looked at her partially functional front limbs, at the mobility chair that had become her new form of freedom. She thought about the family that might suffer if she continued fighting, and the galaxy that would suffer if she gave up. "I am ready," she said. "Let them see what a broken Draconari can do." The night before Korthax was scheduled to address the Galactic Council with her evidence, the embassy complex fell into a deceptive calm. Security patrols ran their normal routes. Diplomatic staff finished their evening routines, and the hallways emptied as most personnel retired to their quarters. Daniel knew something was wrong before the first alarm failed to trigger. 23 years of combat experience had taught him to trust the prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the instinct that whispered danger when logic saw nothing but shadows. He was sitting with Korthax in her quarters, reviewing the testimony she would deliver tomorrow when the lights flickered and died. Emergency power activated within seconds, bathing the room in dim red illumination. But the security screens remained dark. "The network is down," Daniel said, already moving toward the door. "Someone took out the central hub." "Assassins," Korthax breathed. "They know about tomorrow." Daniel drew his sidearm and checked the corridor. Empty, but that meant nothing. Professional killers would not announce their presence until they were ready to strike. "We need to move you to a secure location," he said. "I cannot move quickly," Korthax reminded him, gesturing at her mobility chair. "I will slow you down." "Then I guess we are both going slow tonight." He pushed her chair into the hallway, heading toward the emergency bunker 3 floors below. They made it halfway to the elevator before 3 figures emerged from the darkness ahead, their bodies covered in light-absorbing stealth suits that made them almost invisible against the shadows. Valori assassins, Daniel recognized immediately. Their elongated limbs and triple-jointed movements were unmistakable. They carried neural disruptors similar to the one that had paralyzed Corthax, along with plasma blades that hummed with lethal energy. "The human is not the target," one of them said, in accented common tongue. "Step aside, and you will live." Daniel positioned himself between Corthax and the assassins. "That is not going to happen. Your loyalty to this broken creature is admirable but foolish," the lead assassin said. "She cannot fly, cannot walk, cannot even feed herself. Why would you die for something so worthless?" "You know what?" Daniel replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I am really tired of people deciding who deserves to live based on what their body can do. She's worth more than the three of you combined, and if you want her, you go through me." The assassins exchanged glances. They had expected the human to run or surrender, not stand his ground against three armed professionals. But orders were orders, and they could not leave witnesses. The first one attacked. Daniel had studied Valori combat styles during his military career, knew that their triple-jointed limbs gave them reach and flexibility that humans could not match. But humans had something the Valori often underestimated: unpredictability born from desperation, instead of retreating from the neural disruptor blast. Daniel dove forward and rolled beneath it, his prosthetic legs scraping against the floor as he came up inside the assassin's guard. He drove his elbow into the soft junction where the Valori's thorax met its abdomen, then grabbed the neural disruptor and wrenched it free. The second assassin swung a plasma blade at his head. Daniel blocked with the stolen disruptor, which shattered under the energy weapon's touch. He used the momentum to spin away, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall as he moved. He swung the heavy cylinder into the second assassin's knee joint, feeling something crack beneath the impact. The Valori screamed and collapsed, its leg bending at an unnatural angle. The first assassin recovered and tackled Daniel from behind, driving him into the wall. Daniel felt ribs crack under the impact, pain exploding through his chest. But pain was an old friend, and he had learned long ago how to think through. I threw his head back, connecting with the assassin's face. Then he spun and drove his prosthetic leg into its midsection. The metal limb delivered far more force than flesh and bone ever could. And the assassin doubled over Daniel, grabbed its head, and slammed it into the wall once, twice, 3 times until the body went limp 2 down. 1 to go, but the third assassin had circled around during the fight, then now stood behind Corthax, a plasma blade hovering centimeters from her neck. "Enough," it said. "Drop your weapon or I end her now." Daniel froze, blood dripping from a cut above his eye, his broken ribs screaming with every breath. He had no weapon left, nothing but empty hands and a body that was rapidly failing. "Daniel," Corthax said quietly, "it is all right. You did everything you could." "Shut up," Daniel gasped. "We are not done yet." "Such devotion," the assassin mocked. "Touching, really, but ultimately pointless. She dies now, and her testimony dies with her. The council will never know the truth." What the assassin did not notice, could not notice from its position, was that Corthax's front limbs had been slowly moving throughout the confrontation. Months of therapy had given her just enough control to reach the emergency beacon embedded in her mobility chair's armrest. Her partially recovered fingers found the button, and pressed alarms erupted throughout the building as the beacon broadcast her location on every security channel. Emergency lights blazed to full brightness. Automated defense systems activated in the corridors below. The assassin flinched at the sudden noise and light. Its blade wavering for just a fraction of a second. Daniel moved. He threw himself forward, not at the assassin but at Corthax's chair, shoving it sideways as the plasma blade sliced through the air where her neck had been. The motion threw him directly into the assassin's path, and the blade caught him across the stomach. Pain, white-hot and all-consuming, tore through his body. But his momentum carried him into the assassin, and his hands found its throat. They hit the ground together, Daniel on top despite the wound that was spilling his blood across the floor. He squeezed with every ounce of strength he had left, watching the light fade from the assassin's compound eye security. Teams burst through the stairwell doors, just as the third assassin went still. "Daniel!" Korthax cried out, dragging herself toward him with her recovered limbs, her chair abandoned behind her. "Hold on. Help is here. Hold on." Daniel looked up at her, his vision blurring. Somehow, impossibly, he smiled. "Told you," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "More than our limitations." His eyes closed. Korthax screamed his name as the medical team rushed to save him. And for the first time since her paralysis, she prayed to gods she had stopped believing in not him. She pleaded silently. Take anything else but not him. 1 week later, the Galactic Council chamber filled with representatives from 100 worlds. They had come to witness what many believed impossible, a paralyzed Draconari diplomat addressing the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. Korthax. Velshin entered through the main doors in her mobility chair, her silver scales polished to a shine that had been absent for months. The chamber fell silent as she made her way to the speaking platform, and she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Some looked at her with pity, others with disgust. A few Draconari delegates turned away entirely, unable to face what they considered a shameful display. But Korthax was done caring about their opinions. She had spent the past week by Daniel's bedside in the medical wing, watching doctors struggle to save his life. The plasma blade had severed critical arteries and damaged multiple organs. 3 times his heart stopped, and 3 times the medical team brought him back. He was stable now, weak but alive. And that knowledge gave her the strength to face whatever the council threw at her. Honored delegates, she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. I stand before you today, though standing is no longer something I can do. 6 months ago, assassins tried to kill me and failed. They settled for destroying my body instead, believing that my own people's traditions would finish what their blades could not. She paused, letting her words sink in. They were almost right. Among the Draconari, a member of our species who cannot fly is considered worthless, a burden, something to be disposed of quietly so that others need not be reminded that strength can fail. I believed this too. I was ready to end my own life, rather than exist as something my culture despises. The Draconari delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but I was saved by a human, Korthax continued. A veteran named Daniel Cooper, who walked into my room when I was reaching for a blade and refused to leave. He showed me his own wounds, his own losses, and taught me something that my ancient and supposedly advanced civilization never learned. She looked directly at the human delegation, her golden eyes bright with emotion. Humans do not abandon their broken. They do not throw away people who can no longer run or fight or work. They build tools to help them move. They develop medicines to ease their pain. They create entire fields of science dedicated to giving damaged people new ways to live. And they do this not because it is profitable or efficient, but because they believe every life has value, regardless of what that life can no longer do. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. I have evidence that Ambassador Trellis of the Valerie coordinated with corrupt officials within my own government to orchestrate my assassination. These individuals sold military secrets to the Valori in exchange for wealth and power. When I discovered their crimes, they tried to silence me. She activated a holographic display that showed communications records, transaction logs, and surveillance footage that Commander Price's team had gathered in the weeks since the attack. They chose to paralyze me rather than kill me because they knew our traditions would do their work for them. They understood that a Draconari who cannot fly is expected to choose death, and they counted on my own people to pressure me into ending myself. Ambassador Trellis rose from his seat, his elongated face twisted with rage. These accusations are outrageous. I demand that this damaged creature be removed from the chamber immediately. Sit down, Ambassador, the council president commanded. You will have your opportunity to respond. Trellis remained standing for a moment, his compound eyes scanning the room for allies. Finding none willing to meet his gaze, he slowly sank back into his seat. Corthax continued her testimony for another hour, laying out every piece of evidence in precise detail. By the time she finished, the guilt of those she accused was beyond reasonable doubt. Security officers moved to arrest Ambassador Trellis and 3 Draconari officials. High Counselor Zethrak, who had traveled to pressure Corthax into accepting honorable ending, watched with an expression of profound shame as members of his own government were led away in restraints. But Corthax was not finished. I have one more announcement, she said. With the support of the human delegation, I am establishing the Cooper Initiative, a cross-species rehabilitation program that will share human medical knowledge with any world that wishes to learn. The chamber murmured with surprise. For too long, species like mine have treated disability as failure, as something to be hidden or eliminated. Humans have shown me that this is not strength but cruelty, not tradition but fear. The Cooper Initiative will teach what they taught me, that falling is not the same as failing, and that crawling toward hope is braver than flying away from fear. When she finished speaking, the human delegation rose to their feet in applause. Slowly, representatives from other species joined them. Until nearly half, the chamber was standing. High Counselor Zethrak approached Corthax as the session concluded, his scales pale with what might have been regret. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I came here to convince you to die, and instead you have shown me how little I understand about living. Our traditions are not sacred just because they are old. Corthax replied. Some things deserve to be challenged. The counselor bowed his head. The Draconari government will support your initiative. It is the least we can do. That evening, Corthax returned to the medical wing where Daniel was finally awake, propped up in his bed with more tubes and monitors than she could count. I heard you gave quite a speech, he said, his voice weak but warm. Sorry I missed it. You were there in spirit, Corthax replied, maneuvering her chair beside his bed. Everything I said was because of you, Daniel smiled. You did the hard work. I just refused to leave you alone. Speaking of which, Corthax said, her tone becoming formal, there is something I must do. She lifted her partially recovered front limb. The movement still difficult but possible thanks to months of therapy. Among my people, the highest honor we can give is the title of wing brother or wing sister. It means you carry someone when they cannot fly. It means your strength becomes their strength. She touched his forehead gently. You are my wings, Daniel Cooper. You taught me that worth is not measured in wingspan. You showed me that the ones who cannot fly can still help others soar. I can never repay what you have given me, but I can promise to spend my life honoring it. Daniel's eyes glistened. Happy to help. It is what humans do. Corthax looked out the window at the stars emerging in the evening sky. For so long, that sky had represented everything she had lost. Now it reminded her of everything she had found. What happens next? Daniel asked. We heal, Corthax said. Both of us. And then we get back to work. There is a galaxy full of broken people who need to learn what you taught me. Daniel reached out and took her partially functional hand in his. Then let us teach them. He said outside, the stars burned bright against the darkness. Ancient lights that had watched countless species rise and fall across the ages. They did not care about wings or legs, about flight or falling, about the limitations that bodies imposed on the souls they contained. They cared only that somewhere below, 2 damaged people had found the strength to help each other stand, and in a galaxy that often forgot the value of compassion. That was more than enough. That was everything.